Thank you. My name is Walter Hall, and I am a grateful alcoholic. It's only by the grace of a loving and forgiving God I found the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and people like you and meetings like this. I hadn't had to drink alcohol since the 3rd of July, 1974. It's 19 years, 1 month, and I think about 18 days. When I say I'm an alcoholic, I base that identity on the big book that says alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control their drinking. And on the 3rd of July, 1974, that's what happened to me. I'm well described on page 30 of the book. That'll tell you how I got here. Where it talks about there's a principle, well, wait a minute, on page 30, it talks about a state of pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. And I was spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally shot. They tell me that we're supposed to tell a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And I'm going to do that. I'm not going to tell you a lot about a drunk-a-log because I think all of us know how to get drunk. I don't really have any funny stories. I think I was in a blackout when anything funny happened. And the last 5 months I drank, I did stay in a blackout. Probably 95% of all waking hours, and I lost 5 months of my life. And I'm sure that was funny to a lot of people, and there's probably a lot of gratitude involved there with some of them too. I was born over in Baytown, and Patty, I apologize, I think it was you that was talking about these people that start off that they were born so-and-so. And I was born into a very, very good family. I had probably as happy a childhood as anyone could have. My mother and dad had 4 children, and they just showered us with love. My dad worked real hard to see that we had everything that we needed. We were a medium income family, and we lived from payday to payday. And my dad didn't allow any drinking in his home except at Christmas. And every year at Christmas he would go to the liquor store and he'd buy a fifth of whiskey. And if you were an adult and you came to visit us during the holidays, the adults were allowed in the kitchen, no children were allowed in there. And if you wanted a shot of whiskey in your eggnog, then you got a drink of whiskey in our house. You weren't going to get a straight shot of whiskey, and you wasn't going to pour it over any water or anything else, but that was just it, and that was the way it was. I didn't understand that, and I never really talked to my dad about it, but I did find out years later that my grandfather had a very, very bad drinking problem. And I was fortunate enough that I spent a lot of years with my grandfather, and I never knew him to take a drink. And he was one of these people that woke up one day and didn't like what he was and who he was, and he put the bottle down and he never took another drink. And there was alcoholism on my mother's side of the family. I say alcoholism, they never made it to the fellowship, so I have no right to say they were alcoholics. But there was drinking problems on my mother's side of the family also. And I know today, you know, from time to time you hear people talking about whether this thing was hereditary or whatever. It's not important to me how I got here. I know that for Walter Hall, I got here because I had a lot of living problems that I couldn't find living answers to. And I reached out for an alternative, and it happened to be a bottle of whiskey. And it didn't solve any of my problems, but it certainly changed a lot of priorities in my life. Anyhow, it doesn't make any difference to me how I got what I got. Again, my father didn't drink, and back in those days, I remember it was a big, big deal. My dad was, he loved to visit. He loved to visit friends and family, and he had a ritual. When he'd come in from work, well, we'd all meet him out there in the front yard, and he'd take his shoes off, and he wore those steel-toe safety shoes. He worked in one of the refineries. And we'd put the shoes on when we was little kids, and he'd throw us up in these leaves, you know, up in the trees, and we'd put his shoes on and drag them in, you know, and my mother'd have coffee made. And they'd sit down and drink some coffee, and my dad would set us in his lap, and he'd say, I'm going to give you a little medicine, and he'd give us a spoon or two of coffee, you know, and boy, it was just a joyous, joyous childhood. And he'd go in and take him a bath and clean up, and my mother and them would have supper ready. And, excuse me, my dad would, when we finished supper, he would go sit out on the front porch and read the paper, and my mother and sisters would clean the kitchen up. And just at a certain time, my dad would go and get in the car and start the car. And by then, everyone knew that it's time to go. We're going somewhere. And we used to go down to the ice house. I don't know how many of you remember whenever you was kids, going down to the ice house where they had all the cold soda waters, in these big containers, with the ice, and they were freezing cold. And we would go down to the ice house and get us an RC or grape it or whatever. And maybe twice a year my dad would tell my mother, let's split a beer. And that's what they'd do. They would split a beer. As I say, we didn't have any drinking going on in our family. I went on and again I had a very, very happy childhood and had no problems. I remember the biggest problem I had was in the summer, and that was having to come in back in those years. Polio was pretty widespread, and they recommended that you take a nap between 12 and 4 or whatever, and my mother would have to spank me, and I'd have to cry myself to sleep because I didn't want to lose that time playing outside. And that was the only problem I had in my childhood. Pulling those shoes off when spring came, and not having to put them back on till time to go to school, and all those grass stains and all that dirt and filth, and just playing and having a good time. And I had a real happy childhood, and I'm indeed grateful for that. And I tell you that because alcohol didn't start over in my family. And my father gave me a good name, and I never started out to ruin that name. But what happened to me, they said, don't ever forget your first drink and don't forget your last. And I have to believe for me that I started drinking when I was a senior in high school, and I think it was a result of some major disappointments in my life up until then. And I remember my first love, okay? And that went down the tubes, and it broke my heart. And I was a little guy, real small. And all the kids, we'd go play Little League baseball, and I couldn't, my eyes wasn't really that good, and I couldn't see the ball. And I was always the guy that'd strike out, and they'd get ready to play, and we'd pick team players, and they never would pick me. I was the last one, and whichever one, that's where I went, And I'd go up to bats, and they'd know I was going to strike out, and if I did get a hit, well, they'd all come in, move in real close, And I always said, God, let me hit one out of here, Well, he just evidently didn't think I needed to do that, and I never did do that. But I think it was, I developed something that I was good at, and I was special at, and that was kicking a football. And I had a cousin, we used to go out there, as I told you, we'd go visit family and friends a lot. And I'd go out there, and when I was a little bitty boy, he'd take me out, and he'd have a football, and he'd make me kick that football just as hard as I could, and I kicked it barefooted. And from the time I was probably 4 or 5 years old, I kicked that football. And I finished my 9th grade of junior high school and went into spring training in high school. And at that time, I was kicking a football from 55 yards 7 out of 10 times in any kind of weather condition, whether it was ice, snow, rain, hot, it didn't make any difference. And I was good at it. And it made me feel good because I was a little guy and I couldn't excel in these other things, but God had given me something that I could develop and I was real good at. So anyhow, we go out for spring training and they said, okay, there was 3 of us that were kicking, and the coaches told us whoever kicked with the most accuracy and all this was going to kick on the varsity team their senior year of high school. And there wasn't really any competition for me because the other guys were good about up to 30 yards. And there just was no competition. And so when it came right down to the wire, they called me in and they said, so-and-so, he's a senior this year, and he was the quarterback of the team, and he was good. He could kick a ball up to 30 yards. And they said, we're going to let him kick this year because we don't want to get you hurt. You're too good and too valuable to us and this, that, and the other. And it just broke my heart. It really did. Here all my life I'd done something that I could excel at. And so I decided right then and there that if that was the way they played football, I didn't want no part of it. And they told me that I could kick, and I could get a scholarship to any university, and if I didn't get hurt, I could go to the pros and kick pro ball. And I told them, no, that's it. And I turned in my football uniform, and I went to a PE class, and I never kicked another football. And there's been a lot of times I've regretted it. I was listening the other day on the news, on the radio, and they was talking about the power kick that they have every year, and if you can kick that ball from 50 yards, you win $50,000 if you kick it back here, and I go to thinking, man, I wonder if I could still do that. And I know that I couldn't, there's just, It's one of those things that we used to be able to do and we couldn't do it. But what happened, I quit football and I turned in my uniform. I never kicked another ball. And I started running with the guys that smoked and drank. And the first time I ever tasted the beer, I just didn't like it. I just didn't like it. It didn't do nothing for me. And so I became the guy who drove everyone around, okay? And there'd be 5 or 6 of us in a car, and everybody had these forged IDs. Back then, your driver's license was your ID, and you'd take these little squares and cut them out, okay, and type in some other numbers, you know, and they'd discolor them and try to make them match out, and then they'd laminate over them, and then, you know, they had an ID where they could go to the drive-in, Prince's. Boy, that was a big, man, if you could sit at Prince's with a beer on that tray over there, you know, in your car, oh, man, you was really big time. And I never got one of those. I don't know, I've had this problem all my life that people just seem to think that I'm a lot older than I really am. And this is the truth. These guys had all these forged IDs. We'd go to Prince's, and that was, like I say, that was a big thing. Everybody cruised then, you know, they'd cruise around. We'd pull up there, and they'd all ask for beer, and they'd say no, and they'd tell me that if you want to buy it for them, we'll sell it to you. I don't know why, you know, again, there's just something about me. And so I'd say, yeah, sure, bring them on, you know. And they'd drink the beer, and I'd do the driving, and like I say, it just didn't do anything for me. We met some girls one summer at Garner State Park, and some of you here tonight know where that is, and you know the real love of the summer of going to Garner State Park. And we went up there and we met these 3 sisters, and boy, they were beautiful. They were from Freeport, Texas. We got some people here from Freeport tonight, so I'm not about to say who they were. But anyhow, we went to Freeport, and my dad had a new automobile, and I said, Dad, do you think it'd be all right if I borrow your car tonight? And he said, yeah, but you better not let nothing happen to it. And I said, no, I won't let that happen, Dad. So we got in that new car, and off we went. We got to Freeport, and it was a big rivalry in football then. I mean, it was like Baytown and Port Arthur, okay? Baytown and Freeport, Brazos Port Export is what they were known as. You just didn't go to their town, they didn't come to yours, because there's going to be big trouble. So we arrive in Freeport, Texas, and we get there, and we run into these guys, and they were from Freeport, and they were in high school, and they were big boys, and they wanted to know what we was doing down there, and so, you know, we thought we was about as bad as they were anyhow. We wasn't going to back down, so we told them what we was doing there. So they said, we're going to have a party down here at Surfside. Why don't you guys go pick up your dates and come on down, but bring your own bottle. Well, all of us big-time drinkers in the bunch, we couldn't bring beer. They said bring a bottle. And so we didn't even know what to buy. So we sent old Darwin in. He was nominated to go buy us a bottle. And he goes in and he buys a 5th of Old Granddad. And I can assure you I will never forget my first drink. That other was just a sip. And I remember that first drink. He came out of that liquor store with that bottle of Old Granddad, and they passed it around. They all got a little slug. And I got me a pretty good slug, and I've heard this since I've been in AA about that burning sensation of that drink, that first drink. And boy, did it warm me up. I got it and it went down, and I can guarantee you it did something for me that I certainly couldn't do for myself. Well, I don't know what happened, but it started burning so bad, I told them I got to have a chaser. They kept talking. I mean, I knew what chasers were because these guys had drank before. I didn't. I was the guy that just drove. And so after about 2 or 3 shots on this 5th Old Granddad, they told me, all we got's orange juice. And I said, well, that's good enough. Let me have it. And they handed me that bottle of Old Granddad that I thought was orange juice, and I was slugging down another shot. Well, it ended up that I don't know how, I never made it to the dates. I don't know if they did or not. The next morning, that night, I don't know how we got back. Somebody drove my dad's car. And whenever I dropped them off, and I still don't know to this day how I got that car home, but I remember a loud noise. And I turned the engine off, and I was pretty messed up, and I said, well, Dad's going to get in the morning. When he starts it, he's going to think he did it. And it made sense to me. So I go to bed, and I wake up, with somebody that's quite irate, and my father wants to know what I did to his car, and I told him the truth. I don't know. And I made it right. I did pay for an engine to go back in there, and he never was willing to loan me his automobile again, you know. I tell you that because I truly believe, as Eve said, the first time I took a drink, I was powerless over alcohol. And between there and the last drink that I ever had, I never controlled one of those drinks. And therefore I identify with the alcoholic, that alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control their drinking. I never had it from day one. Well, I went ahead and finished high school, and I really didn't have many more of a drunk-a-log. For whatever reason, that kind of taught me my lesson. I enrolled in Lee Junior College and decided, you know, that I'd go ahead and go to school, and my mother wanted me to be a lawyer and a doctor and whatever, and I was going to fulfill her desires, and I went in and enrolled in college in September, and I had two desires as a child, and I don't know where they came from, but I had three things that I wanted to do in my life. One, I always wanted to have two children, and I wanted to adopt two, and that came true later in my life. I wanted to be a U.S. Marine, and I wanted to travel the world on one of these luxury liners. Well, I went to college in September. In October, I decided that they didn't have what I wanted, that I just wasn't willing to commit to the type of studying and things that was required, and I was so grateful that I didn't have to be there. And I got to college, and these people could care less whether you did any homework. It wasn't like it used to be. And so this was quite a shock, so I just decided, you know, this ain't what I want. So I joined the Marine Corps, and there was two things that was expected of Marines, and that was to drink and fight. And I didn't have any experience in either area. And I got to boot camp. I weighed 130 pounds soaking wet. And I got down there, and they put the fear of God in me. And I made the transition eventually from civilian life into the military life. And we started drinking, you know, a little beer here and a little beer there, and it wasn't really a big thing. I didn't get any court-martials, and I didn't, you know, go and slap the commandant around or anything like that. And so everything went pretty well. Well, in 1964, I got transferred from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to Camp Pendleton, California. And I came home and I fell in love with this girl. We had been writing, and she was from Houston, and she was a beautiful, beautiful girl, Italian girl. And we fell in love, and we decided to get married. And we got married, and 5 days after we was married, they told me to pack my bags, you're going overseas. And she begged me to go AWOL and all this, and I had no idea this was going to happen, or I wouldn't have married. And the hardest thing I think that I ever had to do up to that point in my life was to have to leave her. But I told her I can't do that, I have to go. And I packed my bags, and I left my new wife on the 6th day. And I went overseas, and I ended up in Okinawa with the 3rd Marine Division. And in August of '64, Vietnam started. Supposedly the North Vietnamese fired at the USS Maddox, and here I am, a newly married Marine, very, very homesick for my wife, confused, and just didn't. So they asked for a volunteer man-out detail, and all they'd tell us is you're going to a combat zone, and so we just fought. I mean, it was like 90-something guys in my company, and we literally fighting each other to get to the company office to volunteer for this man-out detail. And they took 13 of us, and we got on a ship, and we didn't know where we was going. We ended up down there, and we just cruised up and down for 59 days, and there was politics. They wouldn't let us land, and there was all of this other. Anyhow, we had all these big plans, you know, and we were going to build this home and all this, and she was writing me, you know, 2 or 3 times a day, and when I got shipped out, well, they couldn't get our mail to us, you know, and on the way down, they had some troubles on the ship, and anyhow, we pulled into Subic Bay to get the ship repairs done, and I got a message from the Red Cross that said she'd been in an automobile accident in Houston, and that I was needed back there, that it wasn't life-threatening, but that they felt like that if I could get back for just 1 or 2 days, that she would respond to whatever treatments it was, and if she didn't respond, she'd probably have to wear a brace on her back and neck the rest of her life. So I went in and talked to my commanding officer, and I asked him if I could have a humanitarian leave of 5 days, you know, just let me spend 1 or 2 days, and I'll come back. And He told me there was nothing wrong with my wife than anyone else's wife, and that I was gutless and I was a coward and this, that, and the other. And I reminded him that I joined the Marine Corps. I wasn't drafted. And also reminded him that I volunteered for that task force, that I wasn't assigned to it. And my request was denied. And I came back 59 days later, and I got back, and I was expecting, even then, we couldn't get mail. And all the other people were getting mails. The helicopters were bringing mail in. We got nothing. I knew I had a big mail sack full of mail. And I got 2 letters. And one of them was the old things about, the big plans we had and that home we was going to build and all these things, and the other one was divorce papers. She wanted a divorce. And she simply said, when I needed you, you weren't there. And that right there is when I give up on life. And I know there's a lot of people here tonight that can understand what I'm talking about, not wanting to live any longer. And I felt then that I had nothing that I wanted to live for. And so I started drinking, and I kept drinking, and I came back a year later and I got that divorce, and my heart was just torn out. And from then on, I just drank and passed out. And I don't know how. I was in a good company, and the guys took care of me. That's what happened. Or I'd have been court-martialed and probably kicked out of the Marine Corps. And anyhow, I came back, and I got that honorable discharge. And I went on about my business, and I got a job, and my drinking continued, and it got worse and worse. And I know today the progressiveness of the disease of alcoholism, and it progressed itself within me. And I remember as if it was yesterday, on a Sunday afternoon, waiting on the joints to open. And I'd been out, and I was drunk, and I was hungover, and I felt terrible. And Sunday I'd pull up at a red light, and I'd look at the car next door, and be a man and his wife and their kids, and they were all dressed real well. And tears would run down my eyes, and I'd say, why can't I have something that I want to live for? Why can't I have this? This is all I ever wanted in life. And it was all taken from me. And I prayed each day that the next day never came, and I meant it with all my heart, because I didn't want to live. I just didn't want to live. And I drank because I had to drink to live with me. Well, this girl called me, and I'd met her a few years before at Garner State Park. And she called me, and she was divorced, and she had 2 children. And one was 3 years old, and the other was 10 months old, and they were both little girls. And we started dating, and I can tell you, I fell in love with those little girls. I mean, I just flat fell in love. And it's the only thing that would describe me going from a running drunk to all of a sudden I had everything that I'd asked God to give me. And so I married this woman, and I took those little kids, and I built a new home. And the first year, I went from a running drunk to drinking 2 beers. I don't remember any withdrawals. I don't remember any problems whatsoever. And I got a big joy out of those kids. I loved to go to the Dairy Queens and get them chocolate, and the more mess they could make, they had that chocolate from their heads to their toes. And it just thrilled me to death. It really did. And I couldn't have been happier in my life. And I had built this new home, and we had a problem with the drainage. And I went down and tried to get the city to do something. They wouldn't do anything. And so me and my neighbor over there, I don't know, he had a 5th of whiskey, and we figured that we needed to go down there and raise Cain with the city. And so we got into that 5th of whiskey. And I went down there, and I got that drainage problem fixed. I can tell you that. And I embarrassed the public works director so bad, and he was a guy that his family was, they built that city there. And I embarrassed him so bad that 3 days later he wanted to talk to me, and he told me, he said, we need you on the city council. And he said, a guy like you, we need you, Well, hey, a drunk, and somebody tells you they need you, what are you going to do? So I said, well, I don't know nothing about that. Well, we'll take care of this. Here's your filing fee. Go down there and file. I said, well, where do you want me to file? And he told me where to file, what position, and paid my filing fee. So I went down and filed. Well, the sad part is I got elected. And I was running against a guy that had been on the school board, and the incumbent had been in office 9 years, and they said it's impossible to beat this guy. And I just spent the whole time knocking doors, shaking hands, telling them people. And I got elected, and I come to another rude awakening. Called special interest, You wouldn't believe it, but even on the city council, where you can rezone property and make it valuable, where it's residential and you make it apartments and commercial. Anyhow, these people find out what your weakness is, and if it's women, they'll see that you have women. If it's money, they'll give you money. And if it's booze, they'll see that you get plenty of that. Well, they found out right quick what mine was. I wasn't worried about the women, and I wasn't worrying about the money. And so I had, they entertained me a lot. And so I'd have just given the city. I mean, it really, and, it's really page 30 where it talks about that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization is described about us maintaining some type of sobriety, and says that which led in time to pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. And I got into the politics, and I got back into the booze, and the progressiveness of the disease manifested itself. And it wasn't long that I'd forgotten all about what I'd asked God to give me, because that alcohol controlled me. I didn't control it. And those little girls that I enjoyed going and get the ice creams and doing the things, so I didn't have time for them anymore. And I didn't have time for my wife, and I didn't have time for anything else, and I went ahead, and the bottle got me. And I stayed involved in things where drinking was allowed. And I remember my first time to AA. There was a place in Deer Park where I sobered up called the Wheelhouse. And old Hub C ran that place. And the mayor was out of town, and for some reason I was mayor pro tem. And they had asked the mayor to come down and say a few kind words about this old man. He was celebrating his 20th or 25th birthday. Well, I knew something was bad wrong, because my daddy had worked with him back in the 40s out there at the refinery, and I said, I know he ain't 20, 25 years old. But anyhow, the mayor was out of town, and I had to perform, so I go. And I remember getting there, and I remember the sincerity whenever I said, it's wonderful what this man's doing for these people. And I said, he's helping a lot of people. And so I got up and I said the kind words on behalf of the city, and I left, and we went to the nearest club, and I got drunk. And on the 3rd of July 1974, the alcoholism had progressed itself. And as I said, I had a lot of living problems that I couldn't find living answers to, and I didn't have the intestinal fortitude to do the things and make the decisions in my life that I had to make. And I couldn't move on with my life. And it was just, that was the way it was. It was the end. And I remember old Marvy and I used to drink a lot, and they said, don't forget your last drink, and I haven't forgotten that either. Because Marvy and I had been out drinking for a long, long time. And Marvy had gotten divorced, and he was going to go see his kids. His wife had moved up to East Texas, and the joints had closed down at 2 o'clock, and my wife never told me, you can't do this, you can't do that. She didn't tell me nothing when I was drinking. Most of the times I didn't ask, but if I did, she certainly didn't. She wasn't going to argue with me. And that place closed down, and we were going to drive up to East Texas for him to see his kids, and I went home and said, I need to go tell my wife. And I drove in the driveway and staggered in the door, and I was in terrible, terrible shape. And I said, we're going and see Marvy's kids, and I'll be back tomorrow. And she said, you're not in any condition, and you can't go tonight. You can go tomorrow. And God intervened right there, and just like a little boy, I walked back outside, and I said, I'm sorry, Marvy, I can't go. And I went back outside, and I told him that, and he drove off, and he got down at the end of the street and got a DWI. And that was his third one. And I'd got him out on personal recognizance on the first two because I drank with all the judges. I was in politics, and Wimpy over here, me and him used to, that's who we drank with, them judges and things, and put them signs up, and we got them committed so that when we got in this kind of trouble, we could get out of it. And so anyhow, we did that, and Marvy called me the next morning and said, I need you to come get me. I'm down here at the jail. And so I called my old friend, Judge Bud West, God bless him, and went down there, and he said, okay, Walter, but he said, I want to talk to this guy. And he called him in, and I was sitting there, and he said, son, let me tell you something. You got a problem, and you better do something about your drinking. And he said, if you don't, he said, you're going to end up in serious trouble. And so I said, I know a place to take him, Judge, and I'll take him. And I took him to the Wheelhouse, and we drove down there. And I remembered that old man. He was gone. He used to go pick up the vegetables from the store and the bread that they donated to the Wheelhouse. And Marvy wouldn't wait. We waited about 30 minutes, and Marvy left. And I stayed. And Marvy never found sobriety. And I hadn't had a drink since that day. And I'm grateful for that. Because, see, when I got there, this old man told me some things. He told me, number one, that I didn't ever have to live the way I'd been living if I didn't want to. He told me that if I didn't take a drink and just kept coming back, good things were going to start happening in my life. And I wanted that to happen more than anything else. I remember my mother and I are still very close today. And I remember back then looking my mother in the eye, and God knows I was telling her the truth. Mama, I don't want to live the way I'm living. There's just nothing I can do about it. And Hub gave me a way out. He said, you don't ever have to live that way again. You're going to have to do certain things. He said, just come to these meetings and keep coming back, and I'll guarantee you in 30 days, good things are going to happen. And I kept coming back, and good things have happened. I wished I could stand here tonight and tell you that it's been 19 years of beautiful sobriety for me. But if I were to do that, that'd be a lie. Because it didn't happen that way for me. Because what happened to me, I got content with saying, my name's Walter, and I'm an alcoholic, and I hadn't had a drink in 5 years. My name's Walter, and I hadn't had a drink in 10 years. And I didn't want sobriety. I just didn't want to die drunk. But I didn't want sobriety because they told me that if you want sobriety, there's 3 things you got to do. Trust God, clean house, and help others. And I had no problem with the trusting God, and I had no problem with the helping others. But that other one had me, and I couldn't do it. And so I just defied everything and everyone. And I fought this program as hard and as long as I could. I fought God, I fought you, I fought the program. I was unteachable, and I didn't care. And they'd tell me, you need to get spiritual. And I said, what I need is a damn job. You get spiritual. And they didn't like that. And after I'd been sober about 3 years, I went to old Hub. You know, Hub was God. I mean, he was God. And that's why he was really my first sponsor, but I wouldn't give him the privilege. Wimpy, remember this. Everybody, I think y'all know how it is. You know, the old timers, that's my sponsor. Everybody wanted the old timer to be their sponsor, so everybody had to have Hub for a sponsor. I said, hell, ain't no way I'm asking that old man to be my sponsor. So I fixed him up, and I went and got old Harold G. And I said, Harold, would you be my sponsor? Well, that made Hub mad. I mean, real mad. And Harold wasn't much of a sponsor. He tried. But anyhow, I didn't give Hub the satisfaction. I was the one that kind of defied it. And anyhow, I just kind of cruised along, and I went down there and I told him I was going to Saudi Arabia, and he said, well, you go ahead, but if you do, you're going to get drunk. And I said, I might, old man, but it ain't going to be over you. You can bet on that. You know, we get suckered into these things, you know. That old man, all he was trying to do, and it worked. Because I went over there and stayed 7 years, and I didn't take a drink. And we had AA over there. We had little bitty groups. And you did literally put your life in your hands whenever you went out to those meetings because of the danger of the highways. And I remember I'd come home once a year. Man, I'd go to eating meetings, and we didn't have chips, and we didn't have, you know, eating meetings. We didn't have conferences. We didn't have anything. We just had the AA meeting. And we'd have 2 a week. And that was better than nothing. But man, I got my bucket full when I came back because I went to a lot of AA. And today, the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, until you don't have that, and all you had was a meeting, my God, we've missed it all. And you know, I went ahead and I stayed over there, and I came back, and I'd been married about 17 years, and I hadn't had a drink in 10.5 years at that time. And my wife was still living my drinking days and still telling me what a no-good, sorry drunk I was. And I tried to get her to read the chapter of the wives in the book, and I tried to get her to go to Al-Anon, and she said, you're the drunk, you go, you know. And she wouldn't do it. And so one day I woke up one morning, and we got a cup of coffee, and we had not been arguing or anything, and I said, sit down, we need to talk. And we sat down, and I told her, I said, I'm leaving, and I'm not ever coming back. You can have all the money, you can have the land, you can have everything. I don't want anything. But I had to make a decision because I was going to go back out and drink myself to death. And I knew that. Because you see, the first 10.5 years in this program, because I didn't get involved in these steps and I didn't do the things that they told me to do, my hands were like this all the time and my insides were churning. That hole was still in my gut. I'm here to tell you that God spoke to me in the middle of January 1985, and he spoke to me directly, and he told me in a very clear voice, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. From that day until now, my hands have been steady. My insides have been steady. And every major living problem that I've had has happened since God told me that. And I know today why he told me. Because he was telling me, don't give up. Go back and get serious about this thing. Get back into this spiritual life. Let me show you the way. I got a plan for you. And so I surrendered to God in the middle of January 1985. I decided that just staying sober wasn't enough, that I wanted sobriety. And I'd heard the late Chuck C. define sobriety better than anyone that I'd ever heard it defined, when he said sobriety is the ability to live peacefully, joyously, and comfortably within oneself. And I said, I want that. I want that. That's all I ever wanted. And up until that time in my life, what I saw is I saw people that were dry and people that were sober. And after that, I saw people that were sober, and I saw people that had sobriety. That it didn't make any difference what storms blew up in their life, that they kept right on trucking. And whenever their heart was being torn out, they came to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they said, I got a problem. And they might tell you what it is, they might not tell you what it is. And they said, I need every one of you's prayers. Will you send a prayer up for me? And I learned these things, and I humbled myself, and I started all over. And I can tell you, my heart's been torn out 1,000,000 times since I've been sober, and since that time in the middle of January 1985. And I can also tell you that it's the members of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous that has been there for me every time. And that's what this thing's all about. It's all about reaching out, not stuffing those feelings. I wish to God I would have not wasted those 10.5 years, but I did, and I can't do anything but share my experience with you. And if you're new in the program, if you've been around here 5 years, you've been around here 10 years, and you still got that uneasiness in that gut, and you still got that shaking of those hands, and you're still living the kind of life you was living when you was drinking, it's not too late to start over. You don't have to go as long as I did. The book talks about we had to let go absolutely. And I believe, as sure as I'm standing here tonight, that it took those 10.5 years for me to let go absolutely. Because my alcoholic ego and the things that made me an alcoholic made it totally impossible for me to accept anything else. You know, I've had the joy and the privilege in AA of seeing many, many miracles. They told me that miracles would happen in my life. You know, that little girl, that little 3-year-old girl that I told you about, I went ahead and adopted those 2 girls when I divorced her mother. That little girl, who was not a little girl anymore, she was a grown girl, she disowned me, and she hadn't spoke to me since. But that's okay. Because, you see, my heart and my conscience was clear in the morning that I sat down with her mother, and I told her that I'm leaving and I'm not coming back. It was a matter of, was I willing to go to any lengths? The book had taught me that, and you had taught me that. And had I not done that, I will guarantee you I would have gone back out and drank myself to death. And it's okay. It's okay. Maybe one day it'll be right. But you see, I had the opportunity of going back through sponsorship and friends in the program, and they helped me through that, and my heart and conscience was clear that I was a good father to that girl. And my kids never saw me take a drink. I didn't drink at home. I went elsewhere. And I was a good father to her. And you know, it's just amazing how things happen. You know, I had to learn that the key to this whole thing was about getting my motives right in my life for what I was doing and what I was saying. And today, my motives are right. And you know, anything that I might share tonight is nothing more than my experience or something that someone else in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous has shared with me. But 2 things turned my life around in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. The first thing was the 3rd step prayer. Because you see, in the middle of January 1985, I made a deal with God. And I said, God, from this day forward, I'll never ask you again for anything. If you know every hair on my head, I certainly choose to believe that you know every need and every desire that I have in my heart. And I'll only ask one thing, and that's thy will be done, not mine. And I tell you what I'll do. You take care of my business and I'll take care of yours. And I've lived up to my end of it. And God has certainly lived up to his. You see, I learned these things that I had a God in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, but he was a little God. He only took care of little things. And that's all I gave him. Or he took care of some of the big things, and I'll take care of the little things. And I found me a God that was sufficient unto all my needs. And I made him a deal, and I hadn't reneged on him. Have I been happy, joyous, and free? No. I've had my heart torn out a jillion times. Am I happy? Yes, I am happy. And I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and today I can look anyone in the eye and tell you the truth. This thing is about a manner of living. That's what the book talks about, a manner of living that demands rigorous honesty. They told me early in the program, and it was in the book, and I was sick, but I wasn't sick enough to read it. But they begged me to be fearless and thorough from the very start. You know, it took me, I would say probably around 14 years in this program to show you what a slow learner I am. I mean, if it took 10 and a half years to take the third step, it wasn't too bad. It was just 2.5, 3 more years to learn this. Those promises that are outlined on page 83 and 84 of the book, I believe this. If I don't have those promises every day of my life, my problem is somewhere between page 1 and page 84. And if there's anybody sitting here tonight who honestly in your heart believes that you can't have these promises, I'd like to tell you the guarantee is on page 84. They are guaranteed to happen in your life. And the guarantee is at the end of the promises where it says, are these extravagant promises? Is this some kind of rose garden? We think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. And then here's your guarantee if you haven't read it. They will always materialize if we work for them. So if you're sitting here tonight and thinking that you've lived such a bad life and you've been around here 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, it doesn't make any difference. It's not too late to get right. But it demands rigorous honesty. And it demands surrendering to a power greater than ourselves. And it demands that we be fearless and thorough from the very start. I can tell you that if I would have had my way, I would have sold myself real short because I didn't want sobriety. I just didn't want to die drunk. And I was very content and very happy, as I said. My name's Walter, and I'm an alcoholic, and I ain't had a drink, so-and-so. And I was still living the same way. And if you're in that boat tonight, I'm here to tell you, you don't have to live that way anymore. You can get right with yourself. There's some things that I had to learn. There's some things that it's like humility. I think the first bit of humility that I got in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is when I come to the realization that it was really okay for Walter to be the guy he is instead of the guy he thought he had to be. And I've tried to explain this to a lot of newcomers from time to time, and I believe this. I believe anything that I say up here tonight because I'm not here, to impress you. I'm here to share my experience with you. But you look around tonight and you don't see anyone who looks like you. Their personality is not like you. They don't act like you. You are uniquely different as I am. And I believe that God made us uniquely different because he wanted us to be us. And when I surrendered to that power greater than myself, and I got into that third step prayer, it reminded me of what's really important each day. God, I offer myself to thee. What you see is what you get. The good, the bad, and the indifferent. All the mistakes I've ever made and all I'm ever going to make. I'm offering myself to you. And when I offer myself to God, to build with me and do with me as he sees fit. Then I ask him to relieve me of the bondages of self because the book tells me selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my problem. It's not a symptom. So relieve me of the bondages of self. Why? That I may better do thy will. Here's the good part. Take away my difficulties. Take away my difficulties, my finances, my wife, my kids, my job, my health, and all these. Take them away. Why I ask God to take them away? That victory over them might bear witness to some newcomer down here that says, I don't have any hope. I can't make it. That victory over them might bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And that's all I do every day. I ask that. I suit up and show up. And when I wake up in the morning, I know that no matter what problems I've got in my life, that God has just given me the greatest gift that he can give any human being, and that's the gift of life. And I know who gave it to me, and I know why he gave it to me, because he wanted me to be happy. And you know, there's a little test that I have to go through, and that's when the day's over. I have to ask old Walter one question. When I lay my head down on that pillow, I got to ask me one thing, and I got to get right with me. Did I try to do what was right today? It don't make any difference how bad I fouled up. It's where the real honesty comes about, and I say, I know and God knows I tried. I'm home free, folks. I'm home free, and it's totally immaterial what any human being thinks. You know, this guy Chuck C. that I talked about has added the other part that turned my life around, and I think the man had, without a doubt, the greatest, simplest philosophy of living there ever was. See, when I was a little kid, Roy Rogers was my hero, and when I got into AA, Chuck C's my hero. Because Chuck taught me things like Rule 62. Don't take yourself so serious, and don't take life so serious. Ain't neither one of them no big deal. And he said, it's not my business what you think of me. It's my business what I think of you. And he said, you can't live your way into right thinking, but you can't think your way into right living, but you can live your way into right thinking. Tells me to take the action. And I'm here to tell you tonight, there's a lot of people here tonight that are my friends. A lot of them came here tonight to support me, and I can tell you they're a very, very important part of my program. Because you see, I have had the privilege of watching them go through the heartaches and the death and all the other things that happen. And they show me how to get through these things. And you know, I told you about that oldest daughter that disowned me. Well, there's another little story there right quick, and I couldn't sit down without telling that one. I remarried. My wife had a son and a daughter. And I guess close to 6 years ago, it's been a long time now, this girl was dying of cocaine and alcohol. And I went in to see her, and I talked to her, and I told her, I came in to see you because I want to get the monkey off of my back. I said, you know, you're not going to live another 6 months, because you can't do this stuff as long as you have and survive. And the only reason I came in is because whenever it comes time to bury you, whether your casket's open or closed, all of us that know you're going to have to ask one question: did I try to do everything that I could to help you? So I went and talked to this girl out of love, and I wanted to give her another chance, and I wanted her to know that I loved her. And I cared. I offered her a way out. I said, the house next to me is vacant. I'll pay the rent. I'll come get a truck. I'll move you. I'll pay all your credit cards. I'll give you $5 a day spending money. But you got to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. She said, yeah, I'll do it. I said, no, you think about it. Call me tomorrow or the next day. She called me, and she decided to do that, and I went and got the truck, and I moved her in. And thank God, I remembered something about, obviously, we cannot transmit what we do not have. So this girl came back, and she wanted my help, and she knew that I'd been around the AA program a while. And I couldn't transmit because I'd never done those things that she'd done. And so I wasn't going to do that, so I loaded her in my car, and I took her to another fellowship. And I went with her to her first meeting, and I walked up the stairs, and I sat there, and they said it was an open meeting. And she took out a desire chip, and it just thrilled my heart. And the next evening she wanted to go back, and I talked to her about open meetings and closed meetings and why they're important. And the next meeting, the next night, we went back up there, and they said, this is a closed meeting of so-and-so. And I said, I'm going downstairs, sweetheart. And I went downstairs, and what do you think, whose tape do you think I put in the cassette while I was waiting for that meeting to get over? Yeah, my hero. And I had me a little meeting, and she had one. And I'm here to tell you, she's here tonight, and I love her dearly. She hadn't had a drink, hadn't done any of them other cute things since that day. And I had nothing to do with that. And I'm going to say this because I think it's important. We have a controversy going on in AA today, and that's between the alcoholics and the drug addicts. I think that the traditions cannot be touched. I believe that Alcoholics Anonymous is, was, and should be a program of one alcoholic sharing their experience, strength, and hope with another alcoholic. I also choose to believe that probably 90 to 95%, and I have nothing to base this statistic other than just my observation, but I believe that the majority of the people that come into Alcoholics Anonymous today that are dually addicted can truly identify with the alcoholic. What they don't understand is that us alcoholics cannot identify with your drug addiction. I've been guilty in the past. Maxine one time asked me if I was an AA policeman. I said, no, Maxine, they got some traditions to take care of that. I'm very shameful about this, and I'm very sincere about this, because you see, through my ignorance and my, if I truly am responsible and if I really do love my brother and sister addict, then I should not humiliate them and take the hope away from them. I don't have that right. What I should do is sit down and talk and try to explain to them why there is a difference. And that through my years of experience, I have seen many people come into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and if they just took care of their alcohol problems, these other things took care of themselves. History has proven the importance of the traditions, and I think it was back in the early 1840s. There were 6 guys in a bar in Baltimore, Maryland, and they sat down and they do what we do today. They shared their experience, strength, and hope with one another. And they went in a matter of 3 to 4 years to over 200,000 sober people. And they didn't have traditions, and they decided to open it up. And they said, come one, come all, we got your answers. And they brought in the gamblers and the sex deviants and the I think it was heroin, a form of heroin addiction. And they opened it up, and in a matter of 3 to 4 years, they went from over 200,000 people, that was it. It was finished. That group was called the Washingtonians. And what few people were left that were still sober, they went out to march in support of Prohibition. That's what the traditions did for them. And the next group that came along was the Oxford group. And the Oxford group, they didn't have traditions either. And history has proven, without their traditions, the Washingtonians, they're not here now. The Oxford group, they're not here now either. And I believe that unless we lead some real importance to the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, we will not be here one day, folks. They are that important. And so what I'm trying to depart to you tonight, I guess it was kind of like this Rodney King thing, out in Los Angeles. Can't we all get along? Can't we reach out to our brother and sister addict instead of humiliating them and taking their hope away, and grow and mature and sit down after that meeting when someone's there and says, my name's so-and-so and I'm an addict, instead of standing up and humiliating them? Can we swallow our pride and put a little love there and wait till the meeting's over and go over and say, let me talk to you, let me explain something to you? And explain to them it's our responsibilities to teach the newcomer. And I don't believe that I have done that. I have to fulfill my responsibility. I don't have the right to take the hope away from any human being. And it's kind of like sponsorship, A few years ago when I was living up in Livingston, there was 2 guys up there. And the 2 of them had about 75, nearly 80 years of sobriety. And they told me one thing. They said, Walter, one thing concerns us about AA. And I said, what's that? They said, we don't see the tough love that we used to see. The real love of one alcoholic for another. What we do is we see the satisfying of a lot of egos that people want to play God. And they tell that gal that's new in the program and she doesn't know anything, and she's got a sponsor who's been here 6 months or a year and says, I'd divorce that sorry so-and-so, and she up and does it. And then she's got the 3 kids and her life's in shambles and all these other things. No, that's not what AA is all about. It's about us sharing our experience, strength, and hope with one another. And I hope that I never take the hope away again from any other human being. Will I sacrifice the program of Alcoholics Anonymous by violating the tradition? No, sir. And no, ma'am, I will not. But I think that we have a responsibility to help our brother and sister addicts, overeaters, or whoever by sending them where they need to go. And if we have to get in our car and take them and show them a way out, then we can say, I am responsible. You know, I want to share this. I know that, that you've been sitting a long time, and I don't want to bore you by, staying up here till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning anyhow. Again, I told you what a slow learner I was. Many, many years. And I found this, and boy, it means more to me than anything in the world. There's 3 sentences on page 152. The first sentence says, your imagination will be fired. You remember back when you were younger and when things were good in your life and you had such a good imagination? Well, this sentence says that your imagination will be fired. It says life will mean something at last. I know there's people here tonight that felt like I did when you didn't want to live any longer and life meant nothing. But the book says life will mean something at last. And the next sentence is it. It says, the most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. It doesn't make any difference, Eve, with 48 years, God bless you. It's going to get better. It doesn't make any difference if we've been here 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or 50 years. The book says that it's going to get better, that the best years of our existence lie ahead. So if you're sitting and you think that you've thrown it all away and you've wasted a lot of years, it's not too late. I believe that God has a plan for each and every one of us. I believe that the only reason we don't find sobriety and we don't have all the promises that are guaranteed in this program, and one of the other speakers, I remember who it was, has already hit it, is because we won't accept it. I believe that it's God's will that every person who walks in the door of Alcoholics Anonymous has the life that he has planned for us. And all we have to do is suit up and show up and do our part. Because, you see, I can't go out and mistreat his kids and think that God's going to do all these wonderful things to me. I have to live my life as an example. And if I'm grateful, I'll live it. I won't talk it. If I love my wife, I will show her that I love her. If I love the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I will act like I love the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I believe that love is an action first and then it's a word. You know, there's so many things, and that means so much to me. This page 164. See to it that your relationship with him is right. And if your relationship with him is right, it didn't say good things are going to happen in your life. It says great events shall come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact. You know, I don't know what you want out of life. I don't know what you want out of AA. I don't know where you're headed. But I can tell you this. Of all the things that could have happened in my life, every heartache, every misery that I've gone through was worth it. And I can't help but kind of chuckle today when I hear somebody say, grateful alcoholic. And I know what they're thinking because I used to think the same thing, the sick so-and-so. Well, let me tell you this. How many times have we said, if I had my life to live over, I'd do this, and I'd do this, and I'd do this. That's what we have, the opportunity in Alcoholics Anonymous, with all the mistakes, of all the heartaches, and all the wrong things we've ever done. With the benefit of all of those experiences, we have a chance to start all over. We have a chance to be there when the newcomer comes out and sticks out his hand and fulfill the responsibilities that were given to us. And I'm so grateful for the old-timers before me that's gone to that big meeting, that left their legacies and they left their philosophies of living and they left the program of Alcoholics Anonymous through all of you people in order that it might enhance the quality of my life just a little bit. And that's what sobriety is to me. It's the joy of living. It's not waking up dreading life, staying angry and justifying fear and anger and resentments and all these things. That's not what it's all about. It's all about when your heart's torn out and you can reach out and say, I love you. And I'll be there for you. Because nowhere else in the world do people understand Walter more than you people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've traveled a lot, been in a lot of different places, made a couple of meetings in England here not long ago. And that's the wonderful, wonderful thing that I have, is that no matter where I am in the world, whether it's good or bad that's going on in my life, I can go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and say, my name's Walter, and I'm a grateful alcoholic, and I'm glad to be here. And those people accept me for who I am and for what I am. I want to thank the committee for allowing me here tonight. I think if I would have been on the agenda for last night, I wouldn't have made it. Reggie helped me out quite a bit here a little while ago, and told me that it's going to be all right. And you know, I had a lot of fear had came back, but my friends told me, said, just go up and tell your story, tell what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. You know, by living this kind of life, 3 years ago my father passed away, and I was on the go a lot, and I didn't get a lot of time to see my dad, you know, like I wanted to. And when he got real bad sick towards the end, the job just happened to be where I could be there every day. And so my dad took his last breath, and I was there with him. And before he died, my sister, he stayed alive long enough for my sister to get here from Longview. And I believe that today. And when she got here, my oldest sister and I went in there with my dad, and she said, let's have a prayer. And I said, okay, you start it and I'll finish it. And she said her part, and I said, God, this is without a doubt one of the finest men that ever lived, not because he's my dad, but because he's lived a good, clean life, and he's loved his kids, and he's loved his family and his friends. And he don't deserve to lay here like this. And I said, I asked you to dispatch your angels and come get him. And within 3 minutes, my daddy took his last breath, and his eyes rolled back. And a warmth came on me and my sister, that God had demonstrated his mercy and his power once again. And you know, that's what these things are all about. It's about going through these heartaches. It's about being able to call on God. But the other side of it is we're going to be his kids. We ought to start acting like it. And that we cannot justify living unspiritually. The book says, not me, that this spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. I hope that I haven't led anyone here tonight to believe that God reached out and put his finger on Walter and said, I'm going to show you the way to sobriety, because it didn't happen like that. It all happened because an old man named Hub, God rest his soul, reached out and brought the message to me, and he said, Walter, you don't ever have to live that way again. And he said, if you just don't take another drink and keep coming back, good things are going to happen in your life. And that's how it happened to me, and that's how it'll happen to you. And I hope that you decide that you want what we have. And I hope that you become willing to go to any lengths to get it. And I hope that you'll go back and put first things first. Because if you want to be like me, you would have missed an awful lot in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I can stand here tonight and tell you with all the sincerity in my heart that if I fell from this podium right now and never took another breath, I went out the way I wanted to go. I want to thank y'all for being here. I'm sorry that I kept you so long. May God bless each and every one of you. Thank you.